So hello everyone, thanks very much for being here today. Today we're having our private networks summit session. So this is going to be composed of three different parts. We'll first have a discussion with the mobile operators, so Vodafone and Telefonica, and then we're going to move into some of the different solution providers, VMware, and Docs and Oracle and Dell, and then we're going to finish off with kind of a future outlook on the trajectory of the private network space with Druid Software and the Small Cell Forum and as well with NVIDIA. So it should be a good discussion, really looking forward to it. I hope you're still awake at the end of today and enjoying Fyuz Day 2. My name is Kehoe. I'm a Telecoms advisor and consultant, and I work with a number of different firms in the telecom space, local government, telecoms vendors, mobile operators. So I'm delighted to be here today, and I hope you'll enjoy the session. And if you want to interrupt at any point to ask a question or anything like that, please do. We want it to be an interactive and organic discussion. So just to kind of frame the session today and to give a bit of an introduction, Europe is at the heart of the private network revolution. About 40% of the world's total private network footprint is located in Europe, according to the GSMA this year. And this year has witnessed continued momentum in terms of the rollout of private networks. There's been a flurry of spectrum releases in Europe, most recently in Switzerland and Poland. There's been significant improvements in equipment availability, and there's been strong support from government as well at a policy level for private networks, motivated by the dual objective of supporting domestic industry, but also diversifying the telecoms vendor supply chain. But despite the progress, the market is still very much in its infancy, and private networks are out of the reach for many enterprises. And the industry has much work to do to progress this. So I'm delighted to be here with some experts today to discuss more about that. So first up, we're going to speak to the operators. We're going to have a fireside chat with Jaime from Vodafone and Javier from Telefonica. So I'd like to welcome them both to the stage for a 15-minute discussion. Please give them a round of applause. If you both want to give an introduction for yourself, please, to the audience, starting with Jaime.
Yeah, hello everyone, my name is Jaime Diez. I'm the head of engineering for private networks, edge and cloud. And yeah, I think it's an exciting area within Vodafone. Obviously, as being a telco operator, we want to be the supplier of managed services for customers that want to consume private networks. And yeah, very pleased to be here.
Good, thanks. Great to have you, Jaime. And Javier?
It's open. Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for coming, and thank you for inviting us. I'm Javier Martinez. I lead in Telefonica Tech, the Industry 4.0 product area, and basically the business of private networks, also edge computing, and industrial solutions.
Perfect, thanks very much to both of you. I'm going to start off the session on a bit of maybe a blunt note. You know, the telecoms industry today in its current form, and the telco market would seem to be, you know, near or at the end of its road in its current form. The observations of many would be that telcos are homogenous dividend businesses, you know, that are distinguished only by their branding, you know, and they resell a connectivity service and they've sold off their assets. So I'm curious, both of you, what makes you think you can compete effectively in this space, and I suppose what expertise do you bring that maybe some of the other players in this space don't have? Maybe start with Jaime, you first.
I think, I mean, from our perspective, what we bring to the table obviously is that a private network is actually maybe not as similar to a public network, has differences. The customer consuming it has different requirements and different goals in many cases. But obviously, the fact of having managed and operated networks for 30 years has given us some scars to understand the complexities. And I was mentioning on the panel this morning that I think we need to still have a long way to keep simplifying how a mobile private network is deployed and assembled. So I think we are in prime position to understand those challenges that we have faced ourselves and really keep pushing into the wider industry to really get to a much more simplified scenario. So I think those years of scars hopefully comes together and play into a part. The other thing I would say is that I mean, we are looking at this from a Vodafone business perspective. So obviously we are assembling telco experts, but also we are bringing a lot of enterprise expertise from having dealt with multinationals or different customers around the world. So Vodafone business is a 10 billion business within Vodafone Group, and it's not something that started yesterday, has been there for a while, and you may have heard our CEO also mentioning that we are going to grow that part of Vodafone. So I think mixing the two together make us thinking that we are in a good position. We have the relationship with customers, and we want to bring all of that into their hands.
Okay, very good. And Javier?
Yes, totally agree with you. At the end, we are a telco together. But just to add something else, a part of our, let's say, telco background and our telco capabilities, we definitely believe that it's very important to be very close to the customer. We have been, but we probably haven't been in the way that an industrial customer needs today. So in order to do that, what we have done in Telefonica is to create, a couple of years ago, a specific business unit specifically devoted to this kind of businesses, that is Telefonica Test. No? And Telefonica Test, basically, our mission is to become a relevant IT and OT integrator in this space of Industry 4.0. So doing this way, we are more flexible in combining the telco capabilities with the industry and the customer skills and capability, and also we are allowed to simplify the things that probably inside the telco cannot be done so easily. It's a challenge. For us, it's a bit easier. It's not easy, it's not very easy, there's a lot of challenge there, but we are allowed to deal this business as an integrator.
Okay, so because I've seen some chatter in the news recently, all right, about Telefonica Tech in the last few days. So you consider the role of that particular unit to be that of a systems integrator, is that correct?
Yes, for
okay.
sure.
Okay.
But at the same time, we are able to combine the telco capabilities, for instance, in the countries where the spectrum is not totally available, or combining public and private services in the network spaces.
Okay, very good. And much of the discussion actually today here on the floor has kind of focused on private networks. So we, in the indoor environments, we spoke about neutral host and I suppose how that dovetails with private networks, and you know the focus has been very much on indoor connectivity. But I want to kind of zoom out for a second and look at the outdoor space and kind of understand from the telco perspective. You know, my view, and I suppose the view of many, would be that telcos are perhaps better positioned to participate in that place. I'm thinking particularly about roaming between public, private, mobile networks, and you know what is the status of the market there, and how have you seen the shift in your own portfolio moving from indoor private networks to outdoor campus networks for different types of deployments? Maybe Javier, if you want to go on that.
Yes, I would say that the most important thing is to really understand the problem of the customer that is totally different than the problem that we used to solve in the past as a public service provider. So just for giving three main ideas, the first important thing, and I guess everybody is commenting these days, is to really understand if we are approaching an industrial customer factory, a port, a mine, is really understand the scope and the business case of the transformational project. This is not just a service. This is not just an added service for the customer. If we talk, for instance, to automatize an industrial warehouse, which is part of their intralogistic chain, for the customer, it's a question of a real transformative project that will probably last for 2 years. And it's not just a question of replacing the manual forklift, typically oil-driven for autonomous robots, and just connectivity is something that needs to be there. It's very important to understand the whole thing. This is the first, is the scope of the business case. The second is to be very clear and realistic about the availability of the technology. There is a lot of hype, and we need to be very clear about what is possible to do today and what is going to be possible in the future. Other example can be if we want to have a visibility of the data in a factory connecting to the PLCs, we can do it today. We can do it today, but more as having visibility, acquiring the data to make some analytics with them. But to really cut the cable of the PLC is not possible today. We cannot act today. This has to do with the research about the deterministic networks, DSN. So we need to be very clear about what can be done today and what not. And the third one for me is the ecosystem. It's very important to work together with other integrators, with other telcos, with analysts, with the customers, and with startups typically, and the device ecosystem, in order to accelerate a specific space. For instance, we are very, very active in Minery. Minery is, for me, is a good example of how to combine the different stakeholders working together. For instance, the bulldozer manufacturers, Caterpillar.
And whereabouts are those use cases, the mining use cases?
The mining is just telemanaging, telecontrolling, the big bulldozers that move the mineral.
Okay.
And after several years of working together, today the de facto standard for a bulldozer is that this bulldozer needs to require a 4G network, by the way, a 4G, not always a 5G. This is a 4G network. But from the factory, these big bulldozers require this kind of connectivity. And this has been done working together with the Caterpillar, the Komatsu, also the network vendors, the Nokia, the Ericsson, also the integrators, probably Vodafone, probably Telefonica, also integrators, and definitely mining customers in Canada, in South America, and Australia.
Okay, well, I really liked there how you mentioned kind of the back to basics, move away from these long-term expectations and talk about 5G is needed for everything. I think that's really refreshing to see that. So that's really positive. And then Jaime, from your perspective, thinking about the roaming element, so use cases that potentially might require roaming between the public mobile network and the private mobile network environment, so mobility-oriented use cases, is that an area that you think that has much potential, and how can Vodafone participate in that space?
Yeah, definitely. We see potential. We have a couple of examples of recent customers that have approached us. It's a manufacturing company, have two different plants. One is 2 kilometers from the other one. Obviously, investing on the radio infrastructure only for those 2 kilometers where there is nothing, for them doesn't make sense. So what they have is a private network in each of the plants, and then the path that they are going through those 2 kilometers, they want to use the network that is there. So there is a clear case there for roaming out of the private network and roaming in again. That's one example. The other example we see also is automotive and logistical companies. They, in many cases, obviously their nature of their business is that they are widespread in a very large footprint, and they want to have the convenience of being able to, as their containers, their vehicles move around, they want to have the optionality, right? That when you are on a trusted location, I want to give you access to specific services. And when you are on a non-trusted that you are public, still you need to have connectivity, but with a limited number of services or limited number of solutions.
Okay, very good. And that's some really good points. And if you take a step back, private networks really they represent a convergence of many different technology trends, and there's different contributory elements. So I think about Open RAN in particular, I think about eSIM in particular as well. Can you maybe speak a little bit about how those technologies are supporting some private network deployments and how they're having an impact on it? And particularly think about eSIM in the context of easy onboarding to private networks. If you're at a concert venue or you're at a festival, and there's a private network deployment with localized spectrum access, you scan a QR code, you're on board onto a private network, that could be provided by a telco, could be provided by someone else. How are those technology trends having an impact on private networks, and is there other technologies you think that are important and that need to be progressed first?
Well, I think, I'm going to repeat, I mentioned this morning, so consistent, that I feel that for private networks to really take off, where I think everyone wants, needs to be simple and easy to consume. So anything that can help us to remove friction, help us to make the user experience very easy, right? They don't have to invest on devices, they don't need to make changes, right? That won't really work. So I think anything that helps us, eSIM of course is going to make the transition between different devices a much simpler thing. It could even go all the way down to the very early stage of supply chain, so you can do things there. And O-RAN, I think on a private network context, to me is again simplifying, right? It's about software being open, having APIs, simplifying the deployment, reducing the cost price, which I think this morning was a consistent theme. So yeah, I think any technology is welcome, and I think resisting to something that is actually helping on those terms, I think is a sure game for anyone.
Okay, very good. And it's interesting there, you mentioned the economic element of Open RAN, and we've seen a lot about the greenfield rollouts in the US and Germany and Japan, but then some of the brownfield rollouts now with NTT Docomo, and they're mass scale deployments, they're huge deployments. I'm wondering in the private network context, where you have a very small site, where do you see the economics at the moment for Open RAN in a private network context, in whether that is an internal indoor network deployment in a factory setting, manufacturing, but also campus network for a university or something like that. Where are we today?
Yeah, definitely these points are very relevant to go further in new use cases where the automation and the reduced costs make the business case successful. But today, if we talk about today, the more, let's say, the low-hanging fruits are basically minories, because they need this investment. If you deploy a new miner in South America, you need this. Ports, because the combination of stakeholders there is very relevant, and the terminal providers, the authorities, the different ship companies. So it's a place where the full potential of a private network can be unleashed. And this is basically in Europe and South America. Then in Europe, I would say intralogistics, whatever facility. The intralogistics is because it's very related with the mobile robotics. And these mobile robotics are not all already ready to need only cellular. A number of them are cable, a number of them are Wi-Fi, but it's still happening, and they are replacing the old connectivity for cellular. And also the other that is very mature today, I would say, is the manufacturing in general, for the use cases of typically computer vision, artificial vision, or augmented reality for remote support. Computer vision typically for quality management, defect identification, also for this kind of predictive maintenance, also applying algorithms of artificial intelligence. And this is becoming like the reality in this kind of factories if you want to transform your manufacturing
productivity. Okay. And from a revenue side and a business model perspective, how is this stacking up from an operator perspective? What is the business case like? So from the Telefonica tech side, but also the Vodafone business side, when you approach an enterprise, you provide an end-to-end solution, you work with different partners, is it your view that this is definitely a scalable, sustainable, additional revenue stream for telcos into the future? Particularly among some chatter in the market that some telcos around the world have been looking at spinning off their different business and systems integration units to other entities.
For us, definitely. I think we mentioned we started this journey 5 years ago, and we still have a full division that looks after mobile private networks. So we believe that definitely is going to be an important area. We have actually already 60 real deployments, and which are working, and the last 12 months we have seen actually is taking off. We have seen RFPs with global requirements going full production, no more POCs. So we believe that we are in a good trajectory. Of course, we need to see more, and that's what we are looking forward.
Okay, and is spectrum the blocker, do you think, then? So is the availability of more spectrum in the last 12 months, has that been one of the biggest enablers? Is it the existing markets that have had spectrum for a long time that you're seeing growth in, or is it more the newer markets, or kind of what's the split like in terms of the distribution of, I suppose, private network activity across Europe? Maybe Javier, if you want to bring, because I know you have expertise in South Africa.
Sure. I'm not sure about that. You can say that in Germany there are more real deployments. I wouldn't be so sure.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, the key here is the real problem of the customer, the necessity. If the necessity is not there, doesn't matter the spectrum, and on the other way around, if the necessity is there, we manage. Definitely, if totally, let's say, dedicated spectrum is not available, they can definitely ask to operators, to others. So for me, it's more a question of the maturity of the problems and the maturity of the ecosystem and the maturity of the technology. Obviously, I don't know what would happen if in Germany or UK maybe they wouldn't allow this separate spectrum. Maybe the whole global ecosystem will be slower. But if an automaker in a factory in Germany is deploying these technologies, they are going to deploy in their factories in Spain, but also in Slovakia.
Okay, that makes sense. And I suppose it'll differ in different economies as well, just based on the structure. So Germany obviously is a manufacturing-heavy economy. It's quite industrial. You know, you go to another economy like the UK or Ireland, it might be a different case. You know, where there's less industry, more information-based, and potentially, you know, the private network applications are more on the outdoor, maybe education campus side. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Maybe just one last question before we finish up with both of you. Partnerships have obviously been key, have been really important from the get-go to establish your presence in this space, to collaborate with different providers, as yourselves being a systems integrator you described. Can you talk about some of the challenges in terms of developing those relationships? You know, there's encroachment in the industry. You look at Amazon, they have an end-to-end AWS, private 5G solution. You know, and how is it that you work with different players, and there's different cultures in each of them as well compared to the telecom model, and maybe it might be different in the actual business unit within the telcos, but what are some of the challenges and how do you pick the right partners?
Yeah, I think when we talk about purely connectivity, I think the usual suspects are in the room, and I think everyone has good relationships, things are working well. But I think some of the examples we have mentioned, right? To me, the business case for the customer makes sense, and we were this morning discussing about, hey, to have a computer vision use case, you need a lot of partners, right? A lot of different parties coming together, collaborating, and those relationships in many cases don't exist yet, or perhaps exist, but there are different business units within the existing businesses. So I think there are new collaborations that need to emerge from all of this, and yeah, I think that will happen, right? Like naturally in every new market or new category that emerge. And I think to select the right partners, opening perhaps my playbook, right? I'm coming from the engineering side, so we are really looking for partners that are open, that really have this philosophy of having APIs. We want to have a very software approach to building these networks. Otherwise, we believe that the price points and the costs are not going to be beyond the very, very big customers, right? And we want this to be mainstream.
Okay, very good.
I would say that, yeah, totally agree with you. I think that it's a question of collaborate, and the struggle is more between the players that have a similar role in the value chain. So, in my opinion, all this hype between the AWS, Azure, or Google has to do with their struggle between them. Yeah. But they want integrators, they want startups, they want service provider. So it's more between them to be to place themselves who is the leader in this aspect. Like for instance, Google is for AI, maybe Amazon is more for startup. They want to occupy this space, okay, in my view. But for setting up an application that really transform a factory in Spain, you need a startup from computer vision, you need a telco, you need an integrator, you need a cloud provider.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks a million, Jaime. Great to have you here, and some really, really good insights. And wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I hope everyone enjoyed the first session. We're going to move on now to our next session. And this is a 30-minute panel discussion. So we have some experts from VMware, from Amdocs, from Oracle, and from Dell. So I'm delighted to welcome all to the stage. So I'd like to welcome Axel and Michael, and Shirin and Eric. to the stage for this session. And we're going to have a little look about different types of solutions that are available in the market and how they're evolving over time, and how these particular players can understand the requirements of enterprises in particular. I'll start off with Michael, if you want to just give a quick introduction about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, my name is Michael McGroarty. I'm a business development manager for VMware and focused on our Edge and Telco products. So I'm not going to talk much about that slide. I think just a bit of background, maybe about VMware's approach and perspective on private mobile networks. We have over 300,000 enterprise customers. We talk to them daily on the requirements. And we can see a huge increase in the amount of data that's being generated and processed outside of data centers. It's outside of cloud. And so that's driving this huge demand for edge applications and edge computing. And what do those applications need? Well, they need connectivity. And in some cases, EMEA or private mobile networks, it's the perfect connectivity for those applications. But what we also hear from those same customers is that they think VMware is too costly and too complex. And so I think that's been a real barrier for adoption, well, over the last few years. And that's with VMware, with our solution, what we're trying to solve really is working with the CSPs, the telco operators, but as well managed Wi-Fi providers and other service providers to try and partner and deliver private mobile networks to enterprise, less TCO and a lot more simple.
Okay. Thanks very much, Michael. And Shirin, if you'd like to give a quick introduction.
Sure. So my name is Shirin Esfandiari, and I'm responsible for our product marketing organization within Oracle Communications. So first of all, thank you, Luke, and to all of the panelists. So what I want to discuss a little bit, I think I would probably be reiterating a lot of what we heard or what I've heard throughout the sessions today, that success here very much depends on this being an ecosystem play. So I'm going to touch upon a little bit in terms of how, from an Oracle perspective, we're fueling that ecosystem, starting very much from the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, right, for public dedicated edge applications, so converged cloud for those IT network and enterprise application workloads. And then on top of that, we are also working very much with the public 5G SA deployments that are going to enable some of that network slicing for those types of scenarios. And in addition to these core control plane capabilities, starting with obviously network slicing, but policy and charging, services exposure, analytics, automation, signaling and routing. And then when we're talking about an ecosystem play, I think it's very important to focus on how you can make that ecosystem as frictionless as possible, especially in the context of dealing with your customers and your partners. So that's where we focus on the B2B and the B2X telco applications in the realm of OSS, BSS, and assurance. But one data point that I want to focus perhaps for the rest of this conversation, and maybe something that not a lot of people might know about Oracle, is the fact that we actually have more than 60 different suite of industry-specific applications, right, across 21 different verticals, actually. And so, and these are not IT, these are OT, back office applications for these critical industries that are very much fueling our economy today. And in the past 5 years, we've focused very much on taking those applications to the cloud. And where we are in that journey today is enabling those applications with IoT capabilities and real-time communication capabilities, right? So really simplifying communications for these industry applications.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Shirin. And I think some of what you said there definitely echoed what Jaime had said earlier in terms of the need for a frictionless approach to private networks. Axel, if you want to give an introduction, thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming here. My name is Axel Brinkmann. I'm with Amdocs Mobile Networks, heading up the solutions engineering team here in Europe. And the Amdocs journey in MPN began quite a few years ago in the US when the CBRS spectrum was released. And all of a sudden, many new players were getting interested in mobile networks and deploying their own network solutions. So we started off with some very, let's say, basic cases, replacing Wi-Fi networks in campus networks, for example, augmenting the level of security for those networks, and then moved all the way down to more specific applications in the industry, many different verticals that we have come across. Now with the dedication of spectrum to industry applications also in other parts of the world, obviously we are expanding this. But since Amdocs has a very strong telco background, our focus is still collaboration with the communication service providers in this field, really helping with this big dilemma of a very diverse, ever-growing ecosystem of many different players, where the network is not the main objective anymore. It's really the application that runs over the network and that level of abstraction that you have to accommodate in your engineering efforts, especially when it comes to, okay, what does my very specific vertical application need from the network to run seamlessly, reliably? And that's a complete different story to what telcos are used to traditionally. So in Amdocs, we help, paving this way, designing those networks, looking at specific requirements, looking at components that fit in, being cost effective, and finally also to operate those networks at the required service levels.
Thank you, Axel. Great to have you on the panel. And finally, then Eric, if you could give a quick introduction about yourself.
Sure. So Eric van Vliet, I work for Dell Technologies in our Telecom Systems business unit. I'm responsible for the implementation of the strategy from Dell Technologies for Telecom and EMEA. And I think private wireless for Dell has been a great journey in the past through mainly the equipment providers, where we would help them, enable them to deliver cost-effective private mobile networks. But with the whole openness of the telecom industry, I think it has created an opportunity for us, but also a duty almost. Obviously, Dell is an engine for the enterprise market, has been for a long time with our storage, compute, and client devices. We make sure that our client devices, for example, are capable of the new telecom standards like CBRS, and we keep that up to date for the future, so that at least our laptops or our edge gateways are capable of benefiting from things like eSIMs in a private network. These aren't due diligence that we have, because in the end, if there's no end device, there's no need for private wireless network. It will not work. And then on top of that, because of the trend of going open, we're working closely with ecosystem partners. Dell has been a long-term supporter of open. We do not develop, let's say, applications for private wireless networks to manage a no DU application, no core. We work with the different industry partners, but we do create tools to make it easier, because I think it was Jaime who said it from Vodafone. If we don't make it simpler, we cannot drive the cost down, and adoption by enterprises will not happen. And that comes down from the management of the network, but also deployment of the network. Deploying a private 5G or 4G network is complicated.
It is.
But managing it is just as complicated, and having new devices coming in, and that's where we're trying to build some tools to help the enterprises with that. And then on top of that, because of the applications that the enterprise want to use the network for, we work with the telcos to develop those applications, and not just from a technical perspective, but also help them from a business model perspective, because in the end, the enterprise are our customer too. We've dealt with them for many years. We have a route to market to them to deliver equipment if they might need it, services around it might need it, but also applications that we've been delivering for many, many years. And the telco actually works with us to co-develop them with us. So also there, we try to create the equipment that can use the network, help the telcos and the enterprises build the applications, and obviously we're working with the ecosystem to make sure that it's an optimized, cost-effective network.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Eric, and welcome you all to the panel. My first question, Shirin, is for you actually. And and I want to take it back to basics for a moment. So one of the challenges that Eric just mentioned is the actual design phase and thinking about, how can you map the actual requirements of the use cases to the comms network itself. It's a really difficult task, and different players have different expertise in that particular field, and it's important that the network is designed around the requirements of the use cases. What way does Oracle approach that, and how do you approach it?
Yeah, so if you look at this from the whole value chain perspective, right? You have the spectrum, you have the radio, you have the core network, you have the devices, you then have the cloud, the edge, and then the management, all of that, and then the applications themselves. So what I mentioned before in terms of these 21 different vertical industries, so we realized that internally from an Oracle perspective, we have quite a captive audience here in terms of how their verticals are being disrupted, right? So one example that I can mention is our public safety suite of applications, right? So when we talk to those guys, they state that they have three primarily challenges. Number one is that they have a lot of data silos, right? So they want to have a suite of integrated hardware and software applications that's going to enable them to overcome those. Number two is there's a lot of time that they spend in terms of just processing reports, right? So from an emergency situation, you're in the field, you're 8 hours there, and then you have all of the back office work that you need to do. And then the third one, and perhaps where there is such a huge impact on real-time communication, is the fact that they don't have real-time insights, right? So a simple, but a way to communication enable those applications for that industry is providing real-time video feeds to first responders, right? So we have the hardware, as well as the video feeds that are on, if you can imagine the light bar on the car, right? So video that would be installed there, videos that would be installed in the car. So then you have all of this video streams that go to the public safety application cloud, cloud, and then it needs to go back to the network. So where we are at today, for example, is just working with some of the, with the operator in North America and trying to understand how these, or this set of applications, what APIs it needs to consume from their network, and then obviously what would be the business economics around that, right? So very, very, and all of this is 4G today, right? Okay. I think as we move forward, there may be more opportunities to do some image recognition, to do further threat analysis for situational awareness. But where we are today is trying to work together to understand what are going to be the needs of this application from the network perspective, exactly what Axel mentioned, and what we've heard today, right, where this really needs to be a collaboration by a lot of these players coming together to ultimately unlock business value, for the enterprise customer. So what we're coming in is trying to understand that, and then the economics around that, to make it a viable solution for the first responder community within, where we're launching this right now is in the US, in a month from now.
Okay, very good. And I think it's a great example that you mentioned public safety, because a lot of the different use cases that we're focused on in our previous section were very much in the private sector, very much in the manufacturing environment, and it's nice to get a different flavor, I suppose, of private networks being deployed in a different set, and very different requirements when you're talking about public safety. Michael, I want to come to you for a second. The telecoms industry can often, succumb to tunnel vision. I think it was very well evidenced by the messaging around 5G. The industry kind of marketed the benefits of 5G on the standalone version, when in reality what they were delivering was the non-standalone version. So my question is, for VMware, being new to this space, is it a challenge in terms of getting the messaging right, communication with different stakeholders? Do you have to use different language? I asked that in particular in relation to Wi-Fi, and obviously your steep expertise in the Wi-Fi space. When you're talking about private mobile networks? Are you using similar kind of ways of explaining things that you would with Wi-Fi, or is it very different, or what way do you approach that?
Yeah, look, I think, me personally, I've worked in telco a long time. We love acronyms. We have, a different language. But I've also worked with small cell vendors who, we had a lot of conversations with enterprise IT departments. And I think there is a part of maybe VMware coming at it from a non-RAN background is an advantage, because we speak the language of enterprise. We're all about edge applications, edge compute, virtualization, etc. That's our bread and butter. So when we speak to those themes, we really drive it from the perspective of, you have these applications or these use cases. You need a connectivity that meets certain requirements to deliver that, and then private mobile network can, in some cases, be the right solution for that. And I think it's more that it's like a lot of collaboration with the actual enterprise, working on the applications, the use cases, and then delivering the connectivity that provides that. What we have seen is that in some cases there's an anchor use case that may be why you deliver the private mobile network, maybe for one specific application. But then we see that actually more and more use cases come up. I know we talked earlier, there's a lot of data around there about the kind of energy saving that you can get from private mobile networks versus, say, Wi-Fi. So you're not then trying to deliver a private mobile network for ultra low latency or for some very advanced use case. It's saying, actually, for this, maybe it was a sawmill in Sweden, was the use case I've seen. They said for their whole facility would have taken 70 Wi-Fi APs to deliver the coverage that 3 5G cells provide. So I think we don't try not get fixated on very extreme use cases that then demand ultra low latency, and then we say, okay, the answer has to be private 5G. I think we look at it more just, you have these edge compute, you have edge applications, what connectivity do they require?
Okay, so it's similar to what Shirin had mentioned, that you have to design around the actual use case itself and the requirements. And I suppose, Axel, now I want to come to you. The theme of this event this year, as it was last year as well, has obviously very much been about Open RAN, and that it's here and that it's now, and it's starting to be commercialized by different operators around the world. And I'm quite curious. Most of the private network deployments in existence today are quite monolithic in nature. They're not open. They're provided by a single vendor or supplier. And I'm wondering how you see Open RAN playing an increasing role in this space, and how that technology changes that. And coming back to what I mentioned with Jaime and Javier earlier, from your view, kind of how does it change the economics of private networks?
Yeah, as I said earlier, Amdocs actually comes from this other extreme, so more from the telco space. So we are active in Open RAN already, also outside of the mobile private network space, doing integration of our own products and partner products into the Open RAN ecosystem. And what you said is actually the reality. Many of the MPN solutions are still monolithic. And therefore, if you look at this sort of triangle between cost on one hand, flexibility, time to market on the other hand, and the service levels that are required really to run sort of industry applications on those networks, it is not ideal. Right? So right now, running a mobile private network in this monolithic terms is quite an expensive endeavor, and I think it only works in certain industries and for certain use cases. In order to open this up to other applications, other use cases, you need to open up your network as well, which means that even from a telco, from a CSP perspective, if you want to leverage your existing network infrastructure, there's always a missing component that you need to add in. And this component needs to be cost efficient, it needs to be quick, and it needs to be to the point of what the application requires. And I think in this space, Open RAN is a very important initiative. Of course, there's still a long way to go, but we are seeing those trends where at least parts of the network are being virtualized, are being moved to the cloud. We see that, for example, control plane processing is going to the cloud, user plane is handled on the edge, etc. So there are certain benefits of opening up the network infrastructure that really help you to tackle completely new and different use cases, and also be much more flexible in this, because normally if you look at those industry applications, okay, it starts somewhere. There are certain key requirements that you need to accommodate straight from the beginning, but this is not a static thing, right? It's going to grow, it's going to evolve over time. Absolutely. And industry processes are flexible by nature and they are demanding, which means that the network as sort of an element that provides an underlying functionality to certain applications needs to evolve quickly and efficiently in this space. So from that end, I think concepts of Open RAN are important. I think there is still a way to go to make Open RAN completely feasible for the MPN space, but it's definitely a trend that we need to follow. And as I said, we do have the background in Amdocs anyway, so we are leveraging this as much as we can.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Axel. Eric, I know you obviously and Dell by extension have deep expertise in the space. You have end-to-end solutions. You work with partners like Druid and with Airspan for different components of the network stack. One question I have for you is, how do you see the ecosystem as a whole evolve over time? Is the huge number of players sustainable in your view? Can they all work together? And kind of touches a little bit on what I mentioned to Javier and Jaime, but from the Dell perspective, what's your view on that? And you know, particularly with encroachment, as I mentioned already, from big tech, you know, that will facilitate the order, the install, the maintenance, everything end to end.
There's multiple questions there. So let's tackle the ecosystem one first. I think, in contrary to, let's say, macro RAN, we're having a lot of, let's say, a big ecosystem with a lot of players is very complicated for the service providers, because validation, going through, certification into their network is just very expensive and very complicated, and it's not going to happen overnight, and I think is not feasible. So what we're also seeing in the macro network, we see this consolidation is probably the right way of saying, of the ecosystem. Whereas in private mobility, we have a lot less constraints. It is more siloed, which is not a bad thing. Obviously, the ideal scenario is that it's less siloed, that we talk about roaming, private mobile network becomes maybe a neutral host over time. But the flip side of it is, because it's siloed, there's less external factors. So smaller or newer niche companies that come with a great solution, you call them startups, you call them and whatever you want, I think have a much more greater chance of success in that industry, and also for the enterprises to benefit from it. So even though Open RAN is not ready, I think if we're looking at private networks that we're deploying today, they're all open. There are a radio of one vendor, DU of another vendor, core of another vendor. It is our hardware, sometimes not all our hardware, and so on and so on. Okay. So I think private mobile networks are probably more a breeding ground of what is capable. And also, if we then look at some of the application vendors, they can start thinking about what is the niche edge use case that I can bolt onto my, let's say, connectivity fabric. What is that key thing? Could be computer vision, could be something in healthcare, could be something in entertainment, caching. It's something that adds the value for the enterprise, because the enterprise doesn't really care about if it's 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, as long as it delivers the connectivity it needs to run that killer application. And I think that's why you're probably going to see the ecosystem grow, whereas somebody with a great application will do maybe the private 5G core on the side, or buys IP from someone else and builds it in to deliver that solution. So I think it's actually a positive, a large ecosystem, and I think for enterprises it will be part of the success to get what they need eventually.
Okay, so the theme is very much cross-pollination of ideas and solutions and stuff like that. Is there any of the rest of you would like to add to that point, Axel or Shirin or even Michael?
I think it's probably related to the phase we are in, right? So everything is blooming, there are new applications popping up, new players coming in. At some point, we will see that this approach obviously is not the most cost-efficient approach either, right? Because if it comes to interoperability testing, implementing certain use cases on top of certain infrastructures, there's a lot of integration, testing, verification to be done, and normally you try to do this just once. So I would expect that over time, we will see that for certain use cases, there will be certain solution environments that establish themselves, and that there will be some level of economization happening on those in those terms.
Okay, very good.
And I would just say quickly, like maybe again because we're VMware, like openness. Sometimes we focus on the open fronthaul, and then a lot of the integration issues is around DU, VDU workloads running on hardware. There's a lot of testing that goes into that. But Open RAN is also RIC, it's also SMO, it's those interfaces. So I think even if you deploy a single unit GNOB for your private 5G network, it can still have O1 interface, it can still have V2 interface, and maybe there is a non-real-time RIC for indoor positioning app or something that's a killer app for manufacturing. So I think open is important. It doesn't necessarily have to mean every single thing is disaggregated and open. It can be just some of the interfaces.
And Shirin, just to finish off then, I know myself and yourself had a really interesting chat last week, and one of the things that you had mentioned was some of the work that Oracle are doing in the food and beverage industry, which is quite different than the mining or the public safety and stuff like that from a private network perspective. Can you speak a little bit about that, and maybe how for Oracle the market there is developing, and why you've entered that market in particular, and what is the use case for private networks?
Absolutely. So I'll talk more about the application as we're very much in the evolution phase of that. So again, what some may not be aware is that Oracle actually has the food and beverage industry within Oracle has 35,000 customers across 180 different countries, right? So if you look into a Starbucks and you look at their point of sale system, it would either say Oracle or Micros, which is the acquisition that Oracle did. And so Micros was very much focused on the tier 1, tier 2 restaurant business, but now, especially after the pandemic, you have the tier 3, tier 4 restaurants, right? So what we're trying to do is look for those partnerships where we can bring a B2C experience to a B2B business, right? So how can you, as a restaurant owner, walk into, let's say, an operator point of sale, and then purchase this restaurant in a box where you have a QR code, right? So it comes with some of your hardware devices, such as if you're a restaurant, or even potentially a kiosk, or at a multiple events, stadium, etc. So then how can you, let's say as a restaurant, you walk in, you scan in your QR code, and then you have all of the back office and then the front office applications that is provided by the food and beverage industry unit within Oracle, all running in cloud. And then on top of that, the connectivity that would then require us to have that, as I said, those level of partnerships, right? And so right now, again, these very basic use cases, but they do have a lot of, when we're doing a lot of this total available market analysis in terms of how much it could unlock for those partners that are willing to also do perhaps some of those first line of support for those smaller restaurants in case their connectivity goes down and they still want to be able to charge their customers, or then when you have these kiosk type of experiences where you do all of your ordering before or within the restaurant. So those are the opportunities and the use cases that we're exploring right now. Obviously, in partnership with the broader ecosystem, where we're trying to better understand what it could, what are the needs from the market, from the network, but also what role would the various players have in the value chain. and the economics of all of that. So yeah, it's very, very different from public safety, but this kind of goes back to what I was telling you before in terms of having all of these industry applications, and it gives us that opportunity to have that captive audience internally to work out these ideas before we take them out to the market.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Shirin. And unfortunately, now we could probably speak here for hours, but unfortunately, that's our time up for this session. But thank you all for coming and for participating, and great to have you all. Thank you.